Hello, everybody. Thanks for watching. I'm just going to say, throw your comments in the live chat right now if you have any questions and if you have them while I'm doing this video, and then I will get to them at the end. I'm not going to answer them as I go. I'm going to do this the same way I did the one I did yesterday. So yesterday I did a video about why Republicans should consider the Libertarian Party, and I think it was pretty well received. So today I want to do one about why left-wingers should consider the Libertarian Party over the Democratic Party. This is going to be mostly directed toward anti-establishment Democrats or leftists or progressives, because I honestly don't get the feeling that a lot of establishment-type Democrat voters really are unhappy with the Democratic Party. If you are and you're here, that's great. But this is mostly geared toward people who were Bernie supporters or Yang supporters or Tulsi supporters or Warren supporters, people who were upset with the status quo and they want change. And even though you might not agree with everything in the Libertarian platform, I feel that we have a lot of bad messengers who are on the front lines of this battle, and they're misrepresenting our views. So I wanted to first lay out the similarities we have, the overlap in our platforms. And then on the second half of this video, I was going to talk about where we disagree and how we, how I would explain why I feel the way I do, and see if we can approach any common ground there. So, again, this is toward the anti-establishment Democratic voters. So this, just like the Republican one I did last night, I'm trying to talk to the voters. I'm not talking about how the legislators actually end up voting. I'm trying to talk to how the grassroots members of these movements actually feel. So one thing that we definitely agree on is the wars. The wars are the worst thing that the United States government does. They've got to end. It's mass murder for profit, basically. We're blowing up brown people in other countries and destabilizing governments and funding terrorist organizations to enrich military contractors. That's what we're doing. If you're on the left and you don't oppose that, I don't know how you can actually claim you're on the left. So we are 100% with you there. We want to bring the troops home. We want to end all the wars, and we want to cut the military budget by a lot. I would say like 75%. I think it could have been half of what it was while Obama was president. Trump has doubled the military budget. I think we can cut it down about 75% and still be very comfortable, still be very safe, especially if we're just protecting our own country, not trying to further our imperialistic goals around the globe. So that's one area we definitely agree on 100%. Another would be the war on drugs. That has been a massive failure. And I don't personally believe it was actually for good intentions. But even if you do, if you think it was well intended, it has been a failure. Instead of decreasing drug use, it has led to the incarceration of thousands of young men, specifically men of color in the inner cities. And it destroys lives, it destroys job opportunities because you have a record, and it encourages you to get back into crime to try to make money, because it's hard to make it in the real world when you've got a record following you around everywhere. It encourages a lot of violence, a lot of gang violence, because the war on drugs creates a prohibition, and the only trade for drugs therefore becomes illegal trade, and that is done a lot through gangs, and it induces a lot of crime. It also leads to a lot of crime related to border crossings and smuggling of drugs across the border that really would not be nearly the catastrophe it is now if we just ended the war on drugs. Also, the war on drugs was partially initiated to stifle competition, specifically with the hemp industry against the paper industry. The paper industry realized that hemp was becoming a viable competitor in the 30s, and so they led a fear campaign against it. They came up with the term marijuana to try to scare people into thinking that it was a drug that Mexicans used and that it would, destroy your brain cells, and it was a gateway drug and it would ruin your life. And it was very successful. A lot of people still believe a lot of that stuff, but the war on drugs, it's everything bad about government. It's cronyism, it's incarceration, it's life destroying. There's just nothing good about it. So we're with you on the war on drugs. Another area that's kind of related to the war on drugs is criminal justice reform, and specifically police reform. The militarization of the police has not been a positive. I believe that about $100 billion goes to the police forces around the country every year. 100 billion. That's a lot of money. That's an eighth of the military budget. And instead of dealing with the root causes, trying to change society, we're going after the symptoms. We're trying to crack down on crime. We're trying to, continue this prohibition of drugs, and it doesn't work. I mean, you throw people in jail and give them a record that they have to deal with. That doesn't encourage them to rejoin society. It encourages them to try to find alternative venues for making money because they can't do it in the real world anymore. There's also a lot of unjust policies that the police get away with that enable them, like qualified immunity. For those of you who aren't familiar with that, that's I think it's legislation that's evolved over the years, but the way it is now, for a policeman to be convicted, there has to be an identical case in the past that aligns with the charges brought against him in order for him to be convicted. So basically, cops can get away with murder, basically. I mean, they have, but they can get away with anything, and there's nothing holding them accountable. That's obviously got to change. There's civil asset forfeiture, which the police are allowed to seize property before you've been convicted of a crime. That's not okay. No-knock raids, those are not okay. You should have to announce your presence and the reason for why you're entering a residency, 100%. And there's varying degrees. I'll admit that some libertarians are straight up anarchists and they don't even believe in the police. But a lot of us just believe in significant reforms and an accountable police force that is there to protect the people when they need help, not to fight them, not to scare them, not to arrest them for stupid shit. So we're with you on criminal justice reform. Another area that would be victimless crime in general, going beyond drug use, but going to prostitution as long as it's consensual. Anything that you're selling lemonade on the corner without a license, whatever it is, like you should not have to face penalties for any victimless crime. A victimless crime should not be a crime. So we're with you on that. Another area would be the national security state. So the Patriot Act, or software companies giving backdoor access to the National Security Agency so they can see records of our search histories or websites we've been to. We're 100% opposed to all of that. We think that the government should be confined by the Constitution. If they have a suspicion and they need to tap a phone line or they need to check search history, then they need to get a warrant, just like anybody else. The NSA, CIA, whatever, they don't have any supra-constitutional rights. They have to work inside the Constitution just like anybody else. Another area would be immigration. We're with you there. This also varies the extremities, just like it does in the Democratic Party or in the progressive movement. Some libertarians are for straight up open borders. Others want just a more streamlined immigration system, and they want to get rid of ICE. They want to, get rid of detainments at the border, get rid of kids in cages, and they want to fix the problem. Most libertarians are closer to open borders than just fixing the immigration system. But if you join the Libertarian Party, if you do care about immigration, you will find people who completely agree with your stance, whatever it is, because as I've said, it kind of ebbs and flows just like it does in the Democratic Party. Voting reform, that's another area that we definitely agree on. Ranked choice voting, same day voter registration. We support auditing the elections. We were talking about that before the election happened this year, how there are ways to ensure that there's no voter fraud, but also enable people to vote as easily as they can. Those are all things that libertarians are 100% for. We have received the heel of the boot in that sense, because if you watch like Tulsi Gabbard's campaign or Bernie Sanders' campaign, that type of stuff happens to us every election. We're left out of the polls. They move the goalposts on us to make it so we can't qualify for certain things. It happens to us too. So not just out of principle, but also because of what's happened to us, we can sympathize with you. And we completely agree on that front. Getting money out of politics. So this is an area of similarity, but probably different approaches. Libertarians are against the marriage of corporations and state. We think they should be separated. Personally, I think the best way to do that is reduce the state's power over the economy. Because the reason you have lobbyists and the reason you have people buying off politicians is because politicians have so much control over our lives. So they can write arbitrary laws to benefit corporations or benefit certain people. If you remove that ability, then the purpose for lobbyists evaporates. I feel that going the other way, just trying through campaign finance reform laws, that's all great. I'm not opposed to any of those things, but I think they're half measures unless you remove the root of the problem. So I would say that pretty well covers where we agree. Let me go one more. I'd say climate change. I definitely believe in climate change. Most libertarians believe in climate change. It's just going to be a different approach on how we deal with it. And I'll get into that in a second, but I did want to point that out as a similarity. Libertarianism is about dealing with the root of the problem. Why are things so expensive? Why are wages low? Why is the government corrupt? Why are these wars never ending? Instead of going after the symptoms, we want to strike the root and alleviate the problem from the bottom up. So a great example of that is actually wages, right? So there's actually this bill that Joe Biden is pushing that's COVID relief, but it's also mixed with a $15 minimum wage. So nobody disagrees that wages are too low right now. They are. Wages have been stagnant while inflation has gone up and people are losing their jobs. Obviously, something has to change. So, and this is such a pervasive problem, I might go into multiple different facets of it here. But what you have is you have an unskilled population. And so you have a surplus of unskilled workers, and you have a limited amount of low-paying jobs that there's no competition for. So Walmart or McDonald's or whoever, they can pay $8 an hour or $10 an hour, and someone will take that job because you've got such a surplus of unskilled people. that is really the root of the problem with low wages. People have been encouraged throughout their entire high school or even middle school and sometimes elementary school durations that you have to go to college, you have to get a 4-year degree if you want to be successful. So they go to college, they get a useless degree, they end up in tons of debt, and then they have to get a job at Walmart or Costco or Shaw's or wherever, and they're working for $8 an hour while they're in tens of thousands of dollars of debt. And that does not induce wage growth. For wages to grow, you have to have a healthy economy, and you have to have people going into lucrative fields. And these lucrative fields do exist. I've worked in the trades since I got out of high school, and it is hard to find people who can drive a truck. It's hard to find people who can turn a wrench. It's hard to find people who can, put pipes together. It's hard to find people who can do anything because they've been convinced throughout their entire high school duration that if you go into any of those fields that you're going to hate your life, you're going to work 85 hours a week, and you're going to make $2 an hour. And it's not true. I made $120,000 last year. Sorry, the year before last. Last year I had like half the year off. The year before last, I made $120,000 working on power lines. And that's zero college education, just on the job training. So I have no debt, and I was able to make $120,000 when I was 25 years old. So that narrative has to die, that the trades are not lucrative businesses because lucrative fields, because they are. And if we can get people to go into these lucrative fields and fill them and reduce the excess of unskilled workers, then you're going to have wages rise. Trying to just artificially raise the minimum wage without addressing any of the core issues has the exact opposite intended effect. You hear a lot that minimum wages hurt small businesses. They don't really hurt small businesses. They hurt low skilled workers, because a business will cut expenses where it has to. That's just what they're going to do, or where it wants to. Not all businesses have to. Some people are greedy, so they'll cut people off where they want to. So if you are forcing every business to pay every person $15 an hour, someone who has a skill level that is below $15 an hour does not get a job. And, this might not be a problem so much in like New York City or Seattle or San Francisco, but in rural Alabama, a $15 an hour minimum wage is a ridiculous increase. So this idea of a federal $15 an hour minimum wage, it's really destructive. It's going to have the complete opposite intended effect. It's just going to screw over the people who are hurting the most, especially right now, because, these corporations that have made trillions, they can afford bumping everyone up to $15 an hour. Most of them already pay that. But if you're a tire repair place or a restaurant that's struggling to keep the doors open, you're going to have to lay people off to stay in operation. So especially right now, a $15 an hour minimum wage is a really destructive policy. So that's one great example of trying to fix the root problem instead of just going after the symptom. And a lot of people don't like going after the root problem because you don't see immediate effects all the time. They want to see immediate results. And so it's easier to just say, $15 minimum wage, we can all feel good about it. But is it actually fixing the problem? That's what I would ask. So I touched on climate change, which is something that is definitely real. What is the best way to approach it? So you hear a lot of people talk about Green New Deal, more invasive regulations. I do believe that the government plays a limited role in protecting the environment. I don't think you should be allowed to dump coal sludge into the rivers. I don't think you should be able to get away with oil spills in the ocean. I think the government does play a limited role. But I do not think, regardless of what moral conflictions I would have with it, I don't think a Green New Deal is the solution, specifically because of the energy sources they're going after. This idea that we can just run everything off of solar and wind in a couple decades is ridiculous. And I do have a bit of background in this because I've worked on power lines for 6 years, and now I'm a truck driver. So I do know a bit about the transportation industry and the power delivery industry. Solar works great where I live in Utah, in the Southwest. The sun is out all the time. There's plenty of exposure. It's not cloudy that often. It's great. Where I'm from, back in New Hampshire, it will work well like 3 months out of the year. And you also have to do a ton of tree clearing to make fields for these things. Same for windmills. You got to clear a ton of trees in forested areas. I was just at a wind farm the other day, and I know you guys who have driven across the Midwest have seen this. The wind will be blowing, and you'll be going by a windmill farm with 300 or 400 windmills, and 3 of them are turning. You also can't recycle the materials. It's not an efficient source of energy at all. So wind and solar are not going to be powering us in a couple decades. What could help really supplant fossil fuels is nuclear energy. And there are new technologies that are coming forward with thorium reactors where there's a lot less mining involved. They can separate the materials so that there can't be a meltdown if there's an earthquake or if there's a tornado or something. And the thing about nuclear is if you look at these other things like oil and batteries, and you need a lot of lithium or oil for these other sources of energy, the ones that we have and the ones that the Green New Dealers want to move to, you'll notice that imperialism is almost a necessity to obtain those items. That's why we just cooed Bolivia. That's why we're still in the Middle East as far as oil goes. Nuclear takes very few resources. It's very clean, and it's not nearly as dangerous as the fear-mongering campaigns against it have tried to portray it to be. I don't think we've built any nuclear reactors since the 70s. The technology has come a long way. And if we want to get rid of fossil fuels, then nuclear is definitely something we should look into. But I would also say that the free market has led to most of the innovations we've made. It hasn't been through government policy. Government policy has actually mostly slowed innovation down. I think the Green New Deal, things like that, are just a really big waste of time. I think we should be opening the door to alternative forms of energy. You should be allowed to use natural gas to power your vehicle, because even though it's not perfect, it's much better than using gasoline. And that's illegal right now. You can't do that. And it's because a lot of these fuel taxes and barriers that the government has put in place. Before you want to add more government, I would challenge you to look into the government that's already in place that is impeding progress. So education, no one disagrees that higher education is way too expensive. It's ridiculous. But again, we got to go to the root problem. Why is education so expensive? So education, back in like the 70s and 80s, you could pay for a college education by working a part-time job throughout the summer. And then they had this great idea that we start this thing called college loans, so that you don't have to work through the summer and you can pay it off later. So the government was working with banks to administer college loans. And so the prices of those started going up higher and higher and higher throughout the years. And about 10 years ago, I think it's been about 10 or 12 years ago now, they decided, the problem here is the bankers in the middle. We need to remove the bankers, and then student loans will be incredibly cheap again. So they removed the bankers, and it's just the government directly supplying the loans, and colleges just getting more and more and more expensive. So why is that? It's because when you guarantee a loan to a student, the college is off the hook. They're good. Like, they have their money. The government is guaranteeing the loan. The one who's left on the hook is the student. So the government has literally nothing to worry about. If that kid dies, they're fine. So they can jack the prices as high as they want. And those needs will always be met because the government will guarantee the loans. And so that has just led to the inflation of college prices over the years. And the other thing, I alluded to this earlier, is trying to convince every single person that he has to go to college in order to be successful. It's just not true. What we should be doing is encouraging people to go into lucrative fields and dropping the demand for college, because if the demand drops for college degrees, they're going to have to become cheaper. And if we remove student loans, they will have to drop their prices because people won't be able to afford them otherwise. So this is another example of why would you add more government when the government is the initial problem anyway? But by the way, I see the comments for those of you who just jumped on. I'm going to get to them at the end. So if I'm not answering you right away, that's why. So I guess the last, I'll talk about guns for a second. And this is kind of a split opinion among people on the left. Some left-wingers actually do support the Second Amendment, but a lot of them at least put forward politicians who don't. So the Second Amendment, if you read the Constitution, it is not there for hunting. It's not even there for self-defense. It's for protection against a tyrannical government. And I think a lot of leftists this last summer saw what it was like when the government is turning on the people. There was a lot of scary stuff going on during those riots, a lot of cops brutally beating unarmed people. Stuff like that was just a red pill for a lot of people on the left. If the government isn't there to protect you, what do you have? And that's why we're Second Amendment absolutists. You need that as the last line of protection when the government is no longer there to protect you anymore. I guess the last thing I'll touch on is healthcare, and then I'll get to the questions. Healthcare, it's another great example where the government has massively inflated the prices compared to what they should be. One great example is with pharmaceuticals. There are patent laws, patent protections on medicines that have been around for longer than most of us have been alive. It's that illegalizes competition. Only one company is allowed to sell medicine. So whatever it is, whether it's EpiPens or medications, and that is a government mandated monopoly that literally disables competition from happening. So when there's competition, someone else will come forward and offer the same product for less money. And then obviously you're going to take it if you can, as long as it's a good product. When no one can offer a lower price because the government makes it illegal, then the people who have these limited resources, they can jack the prices as high as they want. And there's nothing to worry about because they can't go out of business because people need those medications and they know that they'll pay whatever it takes to get them. So the government protects pharmaceutical companies, drug companies, insurance companies by giving them monopolies. So before we say we need the government to come in and just run the whole show, why don't we remove the predatory regulations that enable profiteering and let the prices come down that way? And this is a broader issue than just healthcare. It's the government does this in a lot of fields. Wherever there is a government mandated monopoly, it causes the prices to go up with zero fear of recourse because they know that the company knows that they don't have to worry about competition. So I'll get to the questions here, but we agree on at least half the issues, I would say. And the Democratic Party has made it obvious that it does not care about people on the left at all. You look at the people that they've elected this year, and then the ones who are supposedly on the left are just doing the bidding of the establishment. They're not really pushing for any of the reforms that they supposedly stand for. So if you want to be part of something new that might not agree with you on everything, but the things we do agree on, we'll actually fight for. We welcome you into the fold. I also briefly wanted to touch on something called left libertarianism. So a lot of people contribute libertarianism to only capitalist ideas. That's not really the case. There are a lot of left libertarians who believe in reshaping the economy through voluntary actions. So they believe in things like co-ops, health insurance cooperatives, mutual aid, community gardens, things like that, sharing wealth amongst each other instead of looking at everything as a market incentive. I've done a video with Vermin Supreme where we went into that in depth. It's on my channel. If you guys want to check that out, you can look into what left libertarianism is. To me, the bigger issues are the authoritarians versus the ones who believe in liberty, not left versus right. The left versus right disagreements, I feel like we can at least approach each other on, where the authoritarian versus libertarian ideas, I just think they're evil. I don't think that spying on all your citizens or mass murder for profit overseas or, locking people up for smoking a certain plant, I don't think that's okay. Those people I have a lot of issues with. So I welcome you guys to check out the platform, see what it says to you. And I'll get to the questions here. Are you a part of the KKK? Okay, I'm just going to ignore all those orange comments. I just commented on your GOP message video. Glad to catch you on a live stream. If you guys got any more questions, just throw them in. There's like 10 questions there that are spam that I'm just not going to answer. But I'll just say that, in 2019, I worked on Tulsi Gabbard's campaign, and she struck me as a very libertarian Democrat. But what I found is through working on her campaign, I actually found out that a lot of hardcore progressives who were to the left of her still agreed with me on a lot more than I realized. That was very eye-opening. People who were hardcore Bernie supporters at certain events, I would sit down and talk with them, and I'd realize that we agree on a lot when it comes to corruption, when it comes to corporate power, when it comes to the wars, when it comes to voter reform, when it comes to criminal justice reform, when it comes to civil liberties, even when it came to gun rights with some of these like hardcore leftists. They're some of them are like Marxists. They believe that self-protection is a human right. So that was very eye-opening for me to kind of meddle in those camps and see how much crossover there was. Let's see, we got some questions here now. You may want to check out Kim Iverson. I also volunteered on Gabbard's campaign as well. Yeah, Kim Iverson, I'm actually trying to get her on the show. I am in email contact with her right now. I've been watching a lot of her videos lately, and she's been talking about a lot of the same things that I'm talking about, she uses the term progressive. I use libertarian, but I think that those two terms are more similar than they are opposite. And she's using progressive in a more broad sense, not kind of the Americanized political term. And I'm also using libertarian in the broader sense, not just the capital L Libertarian Party. Do you think the Democrats are doing a good job holding the Republicans accountable for their actions, or do you think they are falling for the GOP's desperate unity line? It depends on what you mean there. I don't think that Joe Biden is going to attempt to lock Donald Trump up. I think it's kind of similar to the way it was with Hillary when Trump won. The whole lock her up thing. Like he didn't do anything to go after Hillary for any of her crimes, and he just perpetuated a lot of the same types of crimes that she was guilty of. The Democrats holding the Republicans accountable was kind of a hilarious statement anyway, because they're guilty of all of the same types of things. I mean, even contextual things like this, the voter the voter fraud allegations and the wanting to deny the election results, that happened in the 2000 election. I just watched a video the other day of Al Gore affirming the vote in 2000. And it never struck me because he was vice president, but he was also the loser of that race. So he had to confirm his own loss. But there were a lot of Democrats objecting to the election results, saying that they believed that the election wasn't legitimate. And just like Mike Pence did, Al Gore just shut him down, said, nope, it's over, and confirmed the results. So we're going through the same thing. I don't think that the Republicans are any more criminal than the Democrats. I think they're just one big gang of losers, and they ought to all be voted out. A libertarian version of Medicare for all. Let the government compete in the open market. Let the people choose their health care. Thoughts on that? So I'm assuming you're asking like a public option. As long as it's 100% voluntary, so it's being voluntarily funded, I mean, I don't really see an issue with it. But I kind of doubt that only voluntary funding would go toward it. So this is the thing, guys. Like, a lot of people are libertarians because they believe that wealth distribution is just straight up evil. I'm not really in that group. I just realized that specifically the United States government is a horrible administrator of funds and is terrible at math and is just completely corrupt. And I don't want it anywhere near any of my tax dollars because I feel like I can personally administer my own money to people who need help and to help myself better than the federal government can. Obviously, they need some sort of taxation to fund like the military, things like that. I think if we're going to have taxes, the only type of tax we should have is like a fair tax, which is a sales tax, basically. I think taxing people for their income or for their property is just evil. I mean, if anything, we should be encouraging people to save money, not spend money. Our current setup does the exact opposite. You can watch some of my videos on that whole concept to talk about the Federal Reserve, our monetary policy, our tax system, how it's set up to make you a loser, to not make you successful. Anything that the government wants to expand, I'm skeptical that it's going to stay pure, and I'm skeptical that something like a healthcare system would be solely voluntarily funded. That's my thought on that. Will says, is anarcho-nihilism based? Sure. Anarcho-capitalism is based. Yes, I agree. Need to have progressives open to the nuclear, thorium, and molten salt reactors, alternative energy strategies. I would like more practical green energy policies. Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, there's just been this really successful fear-mongering campaign against nuclear, and I think it's because it supplants so many old technologies, and you also don't need to invade half of the world for the resources. So it's a lose-lose for the oligarchs because they want both of those things. I think in India, they're starting to use nuclear power a lot. Someone I would listen to is, forget his first name, but his last name is Schellenberger. And he's actually a progressive Democrat, but he is hardcore on nuclear energy and how it is the best way to combat climate change, the best way to supplant fossil fuels. I've listened to a few of his podcasts, very informative. I definitely would go listen to him. All right, let's see here. I think progressives also misunderstand capitalism and do not call out corporatism and cronyism enough. Sorry for all these comments. I do not have a lot of time here. LOL. No, it's fine. It's all good. I appreciate the comments. So capitalism and corporatism, you sometimes get into a war of semantics, and that's what's important not to get into, because then you're just arguing over terms. You're not having a productive debate. Make sure that you're talking about free markets. You don't even need to say the word capitalism, but free market competition is not corporatism. Corporatism is when the government gets in the middle either props up or crushes competitors. So when it's propping them up, it's like the example I gave with the pharmaceutical companies. When it's crushing them, it's like the example I gave with the war on drugs with the hemp industry. They just banned it. They made it illegal. And so how can you compete? That's cronyism. If we accepted a public funded healthcare option, which would be voucher-based healthcare system, would that be something you'd entertain? Sure. I mean, I'll entertain anything. Like I said, once something is government run, especially by this government, I'm extremely skeptical of how it's going to turn out. So I would not want any part of that. But yeah, I mean, if we want to start something like that, I don't really see an issue. It's all about as long as it's voluntary. Essentially, the only thing that the government has to do with the health is fund it and let the people choose how it's spent. Acupuncture, nutrition, anything on the table, health related. So I don't know if you're talking about I'm assuming you're talking about if we had a voucher funded healthcare option. Or I don't know if you're talking about if it's Medicare for all, if that's the only thing the government has to do with it is funding it. I've heard that argument, but I would compare that with the colleges. With the colleges, the whole argument was getting rid of the middleman, which is what you hear now with Medicare for all. If we get rid of the middleman, then all the problems will disappear. We got rid of the bankers with college, and the price of college continued to go up. So to me, that says that the government funding it and giving it a guaranteed income is the true problem, not the middleman, even though the middleman can sometimes make it worse. A public option was what I was referring to. Last comment question. Deregulation actually would support minority women-owned business, and I am not sure how to appreciate that. Sorry, I got to read that again. Last comment. Question. Deregulation actually would support minority or woman-owned businesses, and I am not sure how to approach that. I'm not sure I'm understanding the question exactly. Unless you're talking about, I don't know if you're talking about occupational licensing and, maybe how to sell it is what he means. Okay, I understand you're asking how to sell it. You are affirming that deregulation would support minority and women-owned businesses. How do you sell that? Okay, I got you. So I'm assuming you're talking about like occupational licensing. Occupational licensing hurts and screws over the people lowest on the totem pole because they have to pay more for education, they have to pay more for licensing, and those types of things are mostly arbitrary. Obviously, if you're going to be a surgeon or if you're going to be a truck driver, you should have to display some sort of competency in order to get your certification. But if you're going to be a hairdresser or a florist or something like that, why do you need a license? Why do you need to pay the state every year to renew a certification? Those are, and that'll hurt a lot of minority-owned businesses in poor places. Women-owned businesses are in the minority too, so you're going to be hurting more women. So it's stupid. Like a lot of these policies that are meant to lift up the people on the bottom, they just screw them over. Fuck barbershop licenses. Yeah, I totally agree. Oh, I forgot. UBI actually would be in a form of lowering taxes and eliminating licensing fees. Got to go. Thanks. I actually don't disagree with that. So pretty much every libertarian you talk to, if you can convince them that there is a way that we could eliminate the current welfare system and instead go to some sort of UBI and we would save money, we would spend less, then pretty much none of us would be against that because it's moving the needle in our direction. We've got less bureaucracy, we've got less spending. So even if it's not the ideal, taxation-free society, then it is a move in the right direction. So we would support something like that. That looks like it for the questions. Thanks to everybody who was watching this on the live stream. If you're watching this afterward, feel free to share this with your Democrat or progressive, leftist, Bernie bro, Tulsi Yang supporter friends, whatever. I want as many people to join as feel welcome. And I think that, we tend to portray ourselves as ideologues with a very small ideology, but libertarianism is the only ideology that brings factions of the right and the left together. Everything else, whether it's the Green Party, Republican Party, Patriot Party, People's Party, it's either right or left, and it's tiny little factions. It's not going to go anywhere. So the Libertarian Party is really the only area where we can grow and form a coalition that can defeat the duopoly, defeat the corporate state, defeat the establishment, defeat the warmongers. All those things are far more important to me than areas where we might disagree on economics. So another thing is, like, if you are a progressive and you do believe in these government programs, regardless of what I say or what other people say, in order to get there, you have to deconstruct what's already in place. I mean, you've seen how this government has botched just single time payments to people. And you think they can handle Medicare for all or free college or UBI? Like, there's no way. We got to vote everybody out. We've got to start from scratch. And, then let's argue about whether or not we should have Medicare for all or free college or whatever. But right now, trying to just implement those policies, especially when you've seen how your supposed purist legislators will vote. Like, Bernie Sanders voted for this giant corporate bill a few weeks ago. He's supposed to be the ultra progressive purist who is, fighting for change for the people. So why would he not vote for some corrupt bill for free college that, pads the pockets of the institutions? It's just a joke. Like, we need to, libertarians and progressives agree on dismantling what already exists. And then if it comes down to it and we actually defeat them, then let's have our disagreements afterward. But the number one priority is defeating the enemy right now, because they don't mind compromising at all. Mitch McConnell and Nancy Pelosi, they will trade right and left policies across the aisle to get more authoritarianism passed. They don't care. I just got a couple more comments here. Bernie also used to be pro-gun, sort of, but he got worse. Nothing matters. This message brought to you by the Nihilist Gang. Well, thanks for offering opinions, even if you are a nihilist. I appreciate it. All right, guys. Well, I'm going to check out here. As I said, share this video with your friends. Thanks for tuning in, and I will catch you on the next live stream or the next video.